come up and present your motion? If you could first identify yourself, your bar number, and then who it is you're representing.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Jeff Hunt. My bar number is 5855. I represent Court TV, ABC News, CNN, Daily Mail, the Associated Press, and NBC News.
Okay. I'm ready to hear your motion.
We did file a motion, Your Honor, to modify the court's electronic media coverage order and decorum order, which previously through the trial has restricted EMC coverage of counsel tables. And as the court knows, this is a case that's attracted substantial national and international attention. I think it's actually been a marvelous opportunity for the public to observe how the court reaches decisions, how cases are litigated, and we all benefit from that transparency, that accountability. That is what the EMC rule that was adopted by the Supreme Court was intended to serve. And as Your Honor knows, under the EMC rule, Rule 4.401, electronic media coverage is presumed within the limitations of the rule. And subsection 6 of the rule, there's several limitations for not showing the jurors, not showing minors, not showing exhibits that haven't been admitted, etc. Counsel's table is not within subsection 6. So as the rule stands, the presumption is that there should be electronic media coverage of counsel's table. And we just simply wanted to clarify for the court that when the jury comes in and announces their verdict, that the videographer and the still photographer for the Associated Press be allowed to show the public, as everybody here in the courtroom would see, counsel's table. I mean, that is the most important part of the trial. This is what we've all been leading up to. Everybody here in the courtroom will be able to observe counsel and the parties when that verdict is announced. And we simply believe that consistent with the rule, unless there is an overwhelming, and the rule says a compelling interest, not to show the parties and the lawyers during the announcement, that it should be allowed, and the court should modify the order to allow still camera photography and the video coverage. We've participated with Court TV in over 30 years of trials, live coverage. We've never had once a situation where the public wasn't allowed to observe the parties and the counsel when the verdict was announced. And that's for good reason. You've had 7 years of litigation, as I understand it. You've had 2 weeks of trial, and the most important people, the people that have the most interest in the outcome of this litigation, is the parties and their counsel. And the public ought to be able to observe them when the verdict is announced. And again, under the rule, Your Honor, the burden is on the party seeking to impose an additional limitation under the EMC rule to come forward with some explanation for why that would be particularly harmful or prejudicial. And there simply isn't any reason for that. If you look at the reasons, the factors that are in the rule, all those factors weigh in favor of allowing EMC coverage of the verdict announcement.
How do you envision this happening physically?
I'm not sure where Wes would like to be positioned, the still photographer. I imagine
There would be a still camera right here,
okay.
but without an operator. That is be remote. Is that possible?
I'm not sure if that works for still, but the video would just be as the video would normally work.
Right.
For the still.
It didn't work Monday or whatever day that was. We had a still camera up there a few days ago. It didn't work.
Yeah, there was a still camera up here before, Mr. Hunt, but I don't know how much control the photographer had over that camera. and it had a very big, long lens, and it was focused on one individual.
But it could be fired remotely from here, though.
He says he could fire it remotely from that position, the camera.
But can they, I mean, if it's,
The aperture,
well, I'm just wondering if it would be focused on one individual or be focused on both council tables at once? I mean, how do you foresee that?
Well, today I don't have the ability to set this thing up since I wasn't able to do it the other day. So
Okay.
it's-
So at this point, physically, what it would require is a photographer to be standing over here and taking pictures. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, I don't
Okay.
have the remote with me today.
Okay. And, I mean, the court TV camera is very unobtrusive. I don't see it. I don't hear it. It can pan and move and do all sorts of things without anyone noticing it. I realize that right now, I mean, this will be the end of the case. So the concern of an interruption of the proceeding is different, but it's still there in terms of decorum. How can we maintain court decorum and still meet the request?
it is there, Your Honor, but we could station the photographer there in a place that's unobtrusive. The jury's here. The focus is going to be here. It's going to be very brief. It's not like we're asking.
And why can't the still photographer take stills off of the court TV feed?
I'm not.
The quality's not going to be there.
They're just different.
I'll hear from both sides.
Yeah,
in
they're
a
just
minute.
different modes of capturing the image. The still photographer is just set up, designed just for that. The images are richer.
And in your experience or your client's experience, how have other courts handled the still photography?
We've usually had the still photographer positioned in a place that's unobtrusive, and for limited periods of time, and not able to go in and out of the courtroom. It's just there.
Thank you. I'll hear from you again, but I just want to hear from the parties.
Sure.
Mr. Sykes?
Your Honor, on behalf of the plaintiff, we have no objection to this. We think it's reasonable. Right now, there's this tripod over here with the camera on it is covered with a kind of a black robe, like two judicial black robes here. And I think if Mr. Bomber was to stand there, and we'll take the screen down, I think that would be fine for us. We don't think that would be obtrusive or violate decorum. So we're in favor of it.
Thank you. Mr. Owens?
Thanks, Your Honor. First Amendment's important to us. There's certainly been a public benefit, I think, to having this in the public sphere. We've noted 3 violations of the decorum order. The very first day my client walked into the court, after I assured her there would be no photographers in the lobby, there was one right in her face as she went through security. Then suddenly one day another camera appeared, and then a third violation we felt. I don't know if you found a violation, but I have still photos of her being taken just yesterday. So we're all for the First Amendment. The idea that the public should see what we see, the public isn't seated in the well of the court. The public is seated behind Ms. Paltrow. The jurors have an interest here. This is stressful for jurors. To have a still photographer standing right where that screen is as those folks come in, I think even if their picture isn't taken, I think it's strange. I think it will be stressful. Mr. Sanderson actually has a privacy interest here too. I thought it was insightful of Your Honor to ask about how this would physically change. If nothing would physically change, and if they're looking at the defense counsel in its totality, defense counsel's table, we would have no objection.
Mr. Hunt? So the defense wouldn't have any objection if nothing changes physically in the courtroom from the way it sits right now?
That's fine, but I still think it would be unobtrusive and completely consistent with court decorum to have the still photographer there for the minute or two that it took to announce the verdict. It's not going to, they'll have already determined their verdict. It's not going to add any additional stress. They have known that there's been media coverage throughout the trial. We disagree that there's been any violation of the decorum order. Counsel has not approached me about that. And we're not.
I know you, but I didn't even know you existed in this case until an hour
I've
ago.
only represented the media in Utah for 30 years.
Yeah.
I know you, but I didn't know you were even involved in this case.
So we're not here about that. We're here about my motion. And it sounds like we squared away the court TV, the video. We'd ask Your Honor for the 2 minutes, unobtrusive. Mr. Sykes makes a good suggestion of moving the stand-up, and we think that can be accomplished, and the public will be richer for it. We're going to have descriptions about the reaction anyway. The press is going to report that, so why not have the images in the video that actually show what the reaction is, so the public can judge for itself what the reaction is. That's the most accurate way to report this to the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, given the fact that there is a presumption in the rule, and given the First Amendment, the court will grant the request as long as, for the reasons stated, as long as that is used to sort of stand between the photographer, the still photographer, and the jury. So we can turn that sideways. The still photographer can stand quietly, and I assume your camera makes no noise?
No, sir.
There's no flash?
No, sir.
Okay. You can stand next to the existing camera then, and when the verdict is read.
Thank you.
All right.